Well, it's already the middle of January, or no, end of January, almost February today. And it's, I guess we call middle of winter. And probably the big storyline this winter is just, we've had a lot of snow, a lot of slush. Some of these lakes are getting pretty tough as far as getting around. And when you have winters where there's a lot of snow, it just seems like it really makes the deeper basin patterns more pronounced. And a lot of times it'll kill those shallow weed patterns, you know, just oxygen up shallow, you know, it just becomes void of life. And so this is kind of a typical winter where we have a lot of snow, and it seems like everything pulls out over the basin. So that's what we're going to do here today, western Minnesota, but this is a pretty widespread pattern right now in the sense that breaking down basins. So we're going to talk a lot about basin fishing on today's show, as far as what to look for, what it looks for on a map, how to approach a basin, because I tell you what, if there is one piece of structure on a lake that can be intimidating, it's a basin, because a lot of times they're big. But if you can break it down in quadrants, and there's some things that you can do to make this a lot less intimidating. But tell you what, this is one of those winters where it seems like every fish in the lake is sucked out over that bowl, suspending over the basin. You know, so before I set up fishing, I'm just gonna go from hole to hole here, and I've got my Vexlar set on manual, so that way it reads the water column quicker. I'm going to turn my gain up a little bit. Don't be afraid to err on the side of high. I'm just going to go through some of these holes here and just see if I can find some fish. These fish suspend, typically they show up, and what I do is I like to rock my transducer side to side. There's a fish right off the bottom. See, when I swing that transducer, you see a few more, but you know, so we'll get down and see if we can catch this fish. And you know, this fish is already left, but we're just trying to get close. A lot of times, you know, you get a jig back down and try to pull those fish back underneath you. You know, the fish might be just 10 feet off to the side. You know, sometimes you got to move around a lot in these basins, but you know, if you can just kind of get by yourself and try to find some fish that aren't pressured, a lot of times you can just sit and run traffic. And so we can find a good spot, you know, we'll definitely flip up the house and be a lot more comfortable. You know, so when you're breaking down these basins, you know, a lot of times you'll see fish houses over these spots. And what I like to do is just get away from everything. If I can find a patch of ice, the bigger the better, where there's just no tracks, no holes, no activity, and it's just what we call fresh ice, or nobody's fished it. That's right where I go to. There he is. Oh, there's a good fish. Oh, look at that. Oh, take my glove off for that. Look at that. That's why we stopped at this hole. Fish like that make a big mark. It is gorgeous. There's another one down there. And the race is on. There we go. You know, they're giving you those up bites. And those fish, you got to get that big stroke on the hook set. Oh, beautiful bluegill. Just a beautiful bluegill, you know. We're kind of focusing on this basin, and these bluegills are mixed in with the crappies. The bluegills are a little bit below the crappies when they come in, but they are coming in and just smoking that silky. And yeah, there's still more fish down there, so I'm gonna get the release. You know, so what's a basin? That's a question that we get. What does a basin look like? And you know, you're not looking for too deep of water in the sense that there's 100 feet of water in a lake. That's not what you're looking for. You're looking for that flat bottom area, soft bottom, that's anywhere from say 10 all the way up to 40 feet, that deep soft bottom flat area that comes off the shoreline. These bowls, these basins will hold in winter panfish throughout the winter. And so when you look at a basin, you know, obviously you want to try to be able to break it down. So a lot of times I look for isolated basins that are away from that deepest water in the lake, or any type of a point, any type of a narrow area where that basin gets constricted, any type of an inside turn, any type of structure that sticks out into that basin a lot of times that deep water next to that structure will hold fish. And so a lot of times you can break down these big chunks of water by just looking for those inside turns, those points, you know, something that'll narrow or constrict the movements of these fish, because these fish are moving in these basins. They're moving almost all the time, non-stop. They're just swimming around in a circle. There he is. Look at that. Look at that. Love it when crappies dig like that. Oh yeah, there's another nice crappie. Whoa! That is gorgeous. Gorgeous. Show you what I'm using here. You know, just a tiny little tungsten jig, which, you know, a lot of times we're fishing basins, you know, we're fishing big spoons, big stuff that gets down fast. You know, bigger tungsten jigs with big plastics, you know, just so that these fish can see it. But get midwinter and that bite gets off and tough. I've just got a couple of spikes on there, just add a little bit of scent, and I'm just dressing it up with just a silkie. I've actually got 2 silkies on. I've got one horizontal and one pointing straight out the back. I just take a scissors and trim them down, but the more mashed up they get, the better. But it gives it just a very insect-like pulsating action that I like when these bites get tough. It just dances, just like a marabou jig in the summertime. You know, come midwinter, you know, a lot of times, you know, the metabolism on these fish, it just slows down. And a lot of times we're scaling down with our presentation. And, you know, through the winter, you know, whether it's bluegills, crappies, you know, a lot of these panfish, they're eating a lot of invertebrates. You know, you look at small insects that are in the water, you know, even back swimmers, you know, just really small stuff. And so I think that's what makes the silkie so effective. You know, the silkie is just a little rubber ball with silk strands coming off this. But what I like to do is I find that I have to modify them a little bit to catch a lot of fish. You can just put them on your jig like just the way they come out of the package, but you're not going to catch as many fish. And so a couple things that I like to do, you know, I like to thin them out, and I like to trim them down, and I like to, you know, I'm pretty particular on how I rig them or how I hook them. Now, the big thing you can do is you can T-bone it and then trim it down, which I'll show you an example here. I've got one in this tank here where I've actually got 2 silkies. I've got one that's T-boned. It almost looks like legs on an insect. And then what I do is on these rubber balls, you can trim them down, or you can pull this rubber ball back and forth through the silk strands, and you can adjust the tail. But a lot of times I'll trim it, and I'll just have it coming right off the back of the hook, just like that, just so it looks like a tail, so it dances. But I'll show you what this looks like in the water here. You can kind of see there on a spring bobber, just gives it a really delicate quiver. You can almost just kind of see here when I just kind of vibrate that spring. It just looks really bug-like. It just kicks. Those strands just pulsate. And so I find on a tough bite especially, you know, you make those little modifications, it's just one more trigger for these fish. These fish come up, they're staring at it, you're pulling your hair out trying to get bit. Just any type of pulsation, any type of action on that jig where it's just tantalizing, it just seems like it just brings those fish up and makes them eat it. And so very, very subtle presentation that works really good when these fish are off. Oh, here they come. There we go. This one's going to be another one of those nice bluegills. Transduce her out of there. Oh, it's a crappie. Just a donkey of a crappie too. I'm telling you, this silkie has been the hot bait for a couple of years now, and this is what you're rewarded with when you put the program together. They are stacked down there. You know, one of the things that we find is a lot of times it's a mixed bag of fish out here where these crappies and gills are kind of roaming together. And what we found is if we move up just a little bit more shallow, we actually get closer to the weeds, and then we're finding some pike and some bass. But, you know, when you find an area of
of fish or an area in the lake that's holding fish, it seems like there's a whole bunch of them. Oh boy, that one's a hole filler. Look at that fish. Oh. Just donkeys. You know, so many people target this quality panfish, and when you get gills looking like this as they're coming out of the hole, those are some absolute giants. Let's get this one back in the water.
Just trying to figure out what these fish want. They're just coming on real slow. It's like I lift up, no response, and I just keep working back down to them here. Sometimes you just have to wait for another fish to show up. You get one or two down there and they don't want nothing to do with you. Then that third, fourth fish show up and they have an attitude adjustment. There he is. Oh, did you see that? That was fun. That was fun. Look at that fish dig. Oh, it's a nice crappie. Oh, look at that. That is beautiful. That is a gorgeous fish. Look at his tall shoulders. Look how thick that fish is. That is just beautiful. That big old mouth. I just love, crappies are one of my favorite fish. They make such a big mark on the Vexilar. That's one of the things I love about them. There, let that fish go. There she goes. Oh!
Those hook sets are free, but they're biting up with such aggressive behavior that you've got to make a long stroke on your hook set. Oh! Now I got what I would assume is that bluegills got spooked off on that hook set, and I got two crappies that are still deciding whether or not they're going to battle me for it. Oh, here comes one from the bottom. Oh! You know, I have so many fish down there right now. I think I'm going to go get my shack and just kind of set up on them. That way I can get out of the wind. And, you know, that's the beauty of these basin bites. When you hop around, you know, we're outside, it's a nice day, but we're able to hop around, and then kind of once you figure out the program and find an area that's really holding a lot of fish, go ahead and set up your shack, you know, and get comfortable and get in there and enjoy the day. Because I've got fish all over, so I may as well hop over, grab my shack, and come back and enjoy this bite.
There, look at that. Look at that fish dig. Oh, never get tired of that. Look at that. You gotta take it easy. 2-pound test. These fish will break you. Let's see what we got here. It's acting like a big bluegill. Look at that. Look at this. That's a nice bluegill. Look at that. Look how thick that fish is. Just love when they get just the big ear tabs. That's a quality fish right there. That's a quality fish. Now we're fishing in western Minnesota in Becker County, and if you're looking at an overview of this area, just an aerial map, it's just covered in lakes. So when you look at the number of quality lakes in this area, the number of lakes with big bluegills, big crappies, this is panfish paradise. And if you love to ice fish, this is just a special part of the world. You know, but this pattern's really common. It doesn't matter where you're at throughout the upper Midwest. When you start finding these lakes with basins, which most of these lakes do, and you start putting a lot of snow and a lot of slush on top of the ice, it seems like that weed growth up shallow starts to die, and these fish just suck out over that deeper basin. And so it's a pretty prominent pattern these winters where we get a lot of snow. Look at that. That little spring bobber rod just bent over. Pull the transducer out here. Oh, look at that. That's another quality bluegill. Wow. You know, we came out here to shoot a crappie show, but this might turn into a big bluegill episode in a hurry. That is gorgeous. You know, what's always amazes me too is just how, you know, these crappies and bluegills run together. You know, right now we're kind of seeing the bluegills, if anything, they're a little closer to the bottom. The crappies are riding a touch above them, but you watch these fish on underwater camera and they just all swim together. It just always has amazed me just how fish attract fish. Oh, look at that. They're stretching that mono. And they are down there. They kind of move in and move out. We're just sitting here running traffic. Oh my goodness. Oh my. Look at that. Those make big marks on the Vexilar. That is beautiful. It's kind of a deal where I'll sit here for 5-10 minutes and not mark nothing, then all of a sudden the cloud of fish moves underneath you, and it's just, you catch a few and then sooner or later they leave. But you know, we're just running traffic. You know, these fish are basically, if you can imagine, it almost feels like they're just swimming in a circle and you're just in the lap.
Yeah. You know, we finally had to put the XT to use. Some of these long hook sets, we're able to get them. Oh, look at that. Just beautiful. Hump on my forehead and a ear tab the size of a thumbnail. You know, we get asked a lot about what we're looking for when we're out chasing these fish, and what exactly we're saying when we're saying we're finding fish in the basin. Well, I look at it as, if you look at a lake map, kind of focus on the areas that look like a big bowl. You know, maybe you've got some shallow weeds, maybe a point, and then find an area that kind of drops down real gentle, or even a decent break that gets down to that, you know, maybe 24 to 30 feet, depending on the lake. And just look for that area, because what happens is these fish move over these basins and they just kind of roam throughout the day. It can be a fantastic evening bite, but throughout the day, if those fish are roaming, you're able to just kind of hop around, find a few, maybe set up on them for a little bit. You know, things slow down now, so I'm going to go back out and hop around the basin. Once I find those fish again, I'll move my shack and be set up on them.
You know, you get some of these tougher bites, which, you know, this can be really typical come midwinter. You know, these fish aren't always easy, and sometimes you have to work for them, but I think it's a big advantage just to line up your rod tip or your spring bob or whatever it is that you're watching, line it right up with your flasher, so that way your eyes don't have to move. So that way you just have everything on one plane. So when you're pulling your hair out trying to catch fish, it seems like it's a lot easier versus if your eyes have to move around. And so line up your flasher with your rod tip. And a lot of times just a matter of just bearing down. Oh, there he is, there he is. High flyer came in. That one's bending the rod. Come on up here. Let me just stretch that mono. Oh yeah, look at there, look at there. That is fun stuff. Oh, I love it. I love panfish. I love catching big panfish. I love catching big crappies. That is a beautiful fish. All right, let's get that fish in the water. Look at that, that just fills up the hole. Whoa, there she goes. Just like a flush when they swim away. But yeah, I mean, that fish came by 6 feet off the bottom, just a big high mark all by itself. You hope it's a crappie, but that's the thing, is these fish are just coming in waves. I mean, we just had a bunch of small bluegills come through right up the bottom, then a couple of bigger fish. Everything's mixed up, everything's mixed together. And so if you are catching a few small fish, but there's big fish in the system, you know, sometimes you just have to cycle through enough fish. But I tell you, when you come out in the basins this time of year, you know, you might see bass, you might see pike, you might see bluegills, crappies, sunfish. And you're gonna probably see big fish. If there's big fish in a lake, chances are almost everything in the lake is living right in this basin. This is the time of year to do it.